Hello everybody, it's Snowflarkyzemos, and I'm here today with my anti-meta deck profile, or as I like to call it, there can only be stun, because this is a build of an anti-meta deck that is trying to take full advantage of the Great Floodgate, there can be only one, to win games, by utilizing as many good anti-meta monsters of different types as possible because there can only be one, restricts both players to only controlling one monster of each type at any given time. So just a little more going in on that than just necessarily the straight anti-meta build. Um, Something that's fun and gives me an excuse to play some anti-meta cards that traditionally, if you're just maxing out on all copies, probably aren't the best ones, but get a little better when they have synergy with there can be only one and the rest of your monsters in your deck. So with that said, let's get into the card by card. First things first, I'm playing two copies of Banisher of the Radiance. This is a 3-star fairy monster with 1600 attack that has a pretty good effect. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. A lot of decks need their cards in the graveyard, so having them being forced to banish them instead is pretty great, and can be pretty annoying for your opponent to play around, so they will definitely not like this card. Next up, of course, is two copies of Inspector Border. This is a machine, 4-star 2000 attack. Very important because the machine is a different type from the fairy, so I can have both of these on the field at once, while there can be only one is on the field. So Inspector Border cannot be normal summon or special summon if you control a monster. That does mean, though, you can set it and then flip it on a future turn. Or if you don't have a monster, you can just normal summon this one from your hand. Neither player can activate monster effects unless the number of monster effects that player has previously activated that turn is less than or equal to the number of monster card types they currently control: Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Exe, Pendulum, and Link. So basically, if they haven't gotten any extra deck monsters yet, they're not going to be able to activate any monster effects, and oftentimes that means they're not going to be able to get to those extra deck monsters, which is definitely pretty cool. And what's nice about Inspector Border is that it only negates activated effects, so effects like Banisher of the Radiance that are not an activated effect are still going to be live while Inspector Border is on the field. Next up, I am playing two copies of Thunder King Ryo, 1900 attack, 4-star Thunder monster, so another new type. Thunder King Ryo says that neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand except by drawing them, which is pretty fine. You don't do a lot of searching in this deck yourself, but that hurts a lot of other players. And of course, during either player's turn, when your opponent would special summon exactly one monster, you can send this face-up card from their field to the graveyard to negate the special summon and destroy it. So do note that you're not going to be able to use that as second effect if you have Banisher on board, but if you have Banisher and Thunder King together, you're not going to be too worried about that fact because your opponent is going to be having a tough time already. But just a little versatility, mostly that ability to stop them from searching cards is why we are playing it. Next up, I'm playing one copy of Fossil Dyna here. Fossil Dyna is a 1200 attack rock monster that just says neither player can special summon monsters. When this card is flipped face up, destroy special summon monsters on the field. So pretty good card. If you're looking to play a better version of this deck, I might recommend playing an extra copy of this over maybe a copy of Ryo or Banisher. Or maybe an extra copy of the next card. But so Fossil Dyna is pretty good, but I have plenty of Barrier Statue and Fossil Dyna builds that I wanted to not make this one so Fossil Dyna reliant. So thus I am playing it at 1 because it's still pretty good, but I want to be showcasing some of the other good anti-meta monsters around. And for our last monster, I am playing one copy of Traptrix Morelio. A 4-star insect monster. Again, all these monsters are different types. So when this card's unaffected by the effect of whole normal trap cards, but most importantly, when it is normal summoned, it adds a trap hole trap card from our deck to our hand. And of course, if this card is special summoned, we could destroy a spell or trap card our opponent controls, but we don't really have a way of doing that in this deck. We're just mostly using it as a different type that has a summon effect that can get us a card that can be useful. Doesn't work with Inspector Border, but that's alright. This combination just gives us a variety of different stun monsters to start off our plays with, and of course allows us to use there can only be one, but not stop us from summoning more monsters to get in more damage. So that is it for the monster lineup. Low monster count for this stun style demise deck. Next, we're going to go into spell cards. I am playing one copy of Mage Power. This is an equipped spell that gives the equipped monster 500 attack and defense for each spell and trap card we control. We're going to have lots of spell and trap cards face down and just in our spell and trap card zone in general, so Mage Power will give a monster a lot of attack. And for some lower attack monsters like Fossil Dino or Banisher of the Radiance, they're going to definitely benefit from that attack, so Mage Power is a great card to have. Next, I play one copy of Moon Mirror Shield. A little different from Mage Power. It's an equipped card that means that when our equipped monster battles an opponent's monster, its attack will become equal to the attack or defense, whichever is higher of the monster it is battling, plus 100. So Moon Mirror Shield basically means that that monster will always win battle, and that is something we want to be doing, so we are going to play it. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. In any stun anti-meta deck, you're not using your extra deck much, so we're going to turn that into draw power. Banishing 3 to 6 extra deck cards lets us draw 1 card for every 3 that we did, so we banish 6 and draw 2 cards. Pretty nice, especially because that is drawing cards, so Thunder King Ryo doesn't stop that, which is pretty cool. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality. Pot of Duality, of course, reveals the top 3 cards of our deck, adds 1 to our hand in exchange for special summoning, which is fine. We're not going to be doing much special summoning in this deck. The only thing to note is that Duality will be turned off by your Thunder King Ryo, so just make sure you play Duality before Ryo if you have it in your opener. And usually that's not punishing enough for me to cut it from the deck, so I'm still playing it at 3 because it just gets so many necessary pieces. And last for the spell cards, I am playing a copy of Card of Demise. Card of Demise draw cards until we have 3 in our hand. Also for the rest of this turn, your opponent doesn't take any damage, and we can't special summon the turn we use this card. But then at the end phase, we discard all our cards from our hand to the grave. Not a big deal. We have so many spells and traps that mostly everything we're going to be drawing off of this is spells and traps that we want to be setting. And of course, since this card is drawing, Thunder King Ryo does not turn it off, which is pretty sweet. And that is it for our spell card lineup. Next, we're going to go into trap cards. We are starting off with 3 copies of There Can Be Only One. This is a continuous trap that says each player can only control 1 monster of each type, which is a very powerful effect, can shut off a lot of decks outright, and is the reason why in this build I'm playing so many different types of anti-meta monsters. Instead of just outright maxing out on the best, it's so I can max out on this card and use of this card. If a player controls 2 or more monsters of the same type, they must send some to the graveyard so that they can only control 1 monster of each type. So pretty cool. A lot of decks, if you have a lot of monsters of the same type, so that can really hurt them from being able to combo or do a lot, and that is pretty good. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Dimension Guardian. Dimension Guardian is a really nice card for this deck because we activate by targeting an attack position monster, and that monster cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. So that's really nice, can protect our Inspector border, any of our good anti-meta monsters that have those good floodgate effects from being removed, and keeps those effects active. And for that reason, we're glad to play that. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Phantom Knight Wing. Phantom Knight's Wing is a trap card that we target a face-up monster on the field. It gains 500 attack. Also, the first time that monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect this turn, it is not destroyed. So a 500 attack boost that is permanent. It doesn't end at the end of the turn. And a one-time protection makes this a really good card to play when our opponent has the out, or maybe they have a monster that's trying to attack over the 1600 Banisher of Radiance. Well, now it's 2100, and that's a lot harder to deal with by battle. And of course, even if they can still battle it, it'll be protected. The first time it would be destroyed. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Phantom Knight's Sword. Phantom Knight's Sword is a pretty good trap card. It's a continuous trap That, of course, says we activate by targeting a face-up monster on the field. It gains 800 attack. Also, if that monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, we can destroy this card instead. So 800 attack is quite a bit of attack, makes our monsters even beefier, and that attack power helps us close the game out quicker and prevent them from being destroyed by battle. And of course, if they would be destroyed by card effect or some other way, we can destroy this card instead. So keep them safe, keep them alive to activate their effects. Next up, I'm playing one copy of Gravedigger's Trap Hole and one copy of Bottomless Trap Hole. These are the two Trap Hole cards I've decided to play so that Mermelio can search. I have two copies of Trap Hole cards in here, so if I draw one, Mermelio can still search another. Gravediggers is pretty nice because while your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand or graveyard, or when your opponent's banished monster effect is activated, negate its effect, and if you do, inflict 2,000 points of damage to your opponent. That 2,000 points is really nice to have because it helps end the game quicker. And of course, you know, effects that are activating in the hand and graveyard are quite common. So, you know, why not play that card to do so? And of course, Bottomless Trap Hole, pretty straightforward. When your opponent monster summons a monster with 1,500 or more attack, destroy that monster, and if you do, banish it. Just a safe option, a one-for-one removal, still solid, especially when you're getting it off of a free search from a monster. Next up, I'm playing two copies of Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike is a counter trap card, of course. We pay 1,500 life points to negate a special summon or a monster's effect, activated effect. So that's pretty cool. You know, maybe they can't activate monster effects while Inspector Board is on, but they can still special summon. And of course, just always good to have a way to back up our answer, and this does so for sure. Next up, I'm playing three copies of Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment, of course, is a great counter trap. We pay half our life points, and we either you know, stop a summon, or we negate a spell or trap card activation. In this deck, in these kind of decks, we have certain cards that are just outright winning us the game, and we want to have the protection for the cards that can out them. Solemn Judgment is that. We want to protect There Can Only Be One when they try to pop it. Solemn Judgment. They want to try to remove Inspector Border. Solemn Judgment. Just whatever they're trying to do, we can stop it. And that's pretty nice. Next up, I am playing three copies of Dark Bribe. Dark Bribe is a counter trap where we can negate a spell or trap card, and our opponent draws one card. So I like the flexibility that this can negate a spell or trap, which is pretty cool. And of course, on top of it, you know, even though it gives our opponent a card, usually the card we're negating is more important than the card we give them. When you have a setup board, your opponent is usually only going to have a few amount of outs, and you want to have the answers to those outs ready. So whatever it is, Dark Bribe is flexible. If you don't like Dark Bribe, you can switch it for some other form of negation, but just the flexibility of it is so good. And Dark Bribe, even though the one card can punish you and lose you games, I will say that that only happens probably about 10% of the time for me, and that makes it worth. And of course, last, I'm playing two copies of Heavy Storm Duster. This is a call for my duel group, of course, because we play lots of spell and trap card based decks, a lot more back row, and Heavy Storm Duster can just pop two of those cards for one card, giving us some card advantage. In exchange, we can't use our battle phase, but that's okay. We're going to play it on our opponent's turn. And with that, we, you know, just destroy some spell and trap cards, gain card advantage. It's good stuff. But that is it for the trap card lineup. So just to quickly talk about the extra deck, there's not much use for the extra deck in this. It's pretty much exclusively extravagance fodder since it is just stun cards. But if you want to do something with it, I've decided to make it a Waking the Dragon extra deck so that I can side Waking the Dragon. Or if you don't like Dark Bribe, you can play a copy or two of Waking the Dragon in place of some of those. Pretty cool to have. But Waking the Dragon is just a trap card that says if this card is removed from the field because of an opponent's effect and is now in your graveyard or banished, you can special summon a monster from your deck or extra deck. So we're going to fill our extra deck with really powerful monsters to summon off of that. The first of which is three copies of Last Warrior from Another Planet, a 2350 attack monster that makes it so neither player can summon. If your opponent pops Waking the Dragon and has an open board, this is a great card to go into. as they just can't summon. All they can do is set monsters, and sometimes that wins you the game. Do note its effect will destroy your monsters, but that's really not a big deal for what a great effect it has. Next up, 3 copies of Naturia Exterio. This is a monster that we can summon that can basically infinitely negate spell or trap cards as long as we have a card in our graveyard. Essentially, to negate a spell or trap card's activation, we just banish a card from our graveyard, send the top card of our deck to the graveyard, and it is negated. That effect is not limited to once per turn. It's a quick effect. You can use it as much as you like, and that is very powerful. We'll just straight up win some matchups. Next, we got 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon, 3,500 attack monster that is unaffected by other card effects. Means your opponent either has to beat it by battle or kaiju over it. Very limited, few amount of options for dealing with this card, and if your opponent doesn't have any available, they will lose the game to this card, which is pretty crazy. Next, I got 3 copies of Mathmech Final Sigma, 3,000 attack monster that is unaffected by other card effects other than Mathmech cards while it's in the extra monster zone. That's fine. That's where we'll put it. And so that just makes it a Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon with 500 less attack. So it gives you an option to summon if your Ultimate Falcons are all banished already. It does have a second effect, which is pretty useful, that if it does battle damage to an opponent's life points by battling a monster, that damage is doubled. Pretty sweet. That can come in handy. And of course, I am playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. This is a 4,500 attack monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. Not as good as being unaffected, but sometimes good enough for 1,000 more attack than Ultimate Falcon. Worth considering in some matchups. You can also not attack and pop a card instead, so that flexibility is pretty cool. And so that's just what I'm doing with my extra deck, so I can slap Waking the Dragon in there in certain times, catch a Harpy's Feather Duster off guard, and punish him for it. So that is it for my anti-meta There Can Be Only Stun deck profile. Let me know what you think. Just a cool way to play some anti-meta monsters that I feel like have fallen out of fashion in anti-meta decks. Don't think it's as good as just playing a straight up barrier statue build or something like that, but it's still fun, shows off some cool cards, and it's still a fun, just different way to play a stun strategy, which is something I enjoy. So let me know what you think. Thanks for checking out the video. I'll catch you all in the next one.